The Thanksgiving weekend at my parents' house had left me feeling utterly drained, a familiar exhaustion that settled deep in my bones. I returned to my modern apartment in Austin, the silence a welcome relief from the forced cheer and constant chatter. Everything seemed blessedly normal, a quiet Sunday evening to recharge before a busy week at Innovest. That was, until I opened my banking app. I had been carefully saving for months, planning to finally set up a recurring investment into a trust fund, a small step toward a future that was solely my own. My eyes struggled to focus on the number staring back at me from the screen, $83.52. I blinked, convinced it had to be a glitch, a server error, anything but the truth. I refreshed the app once, twice, a third time. The number remained, stark and mocking. Just 2 days ago, a little over $9,000 had been sitting in that account, the fruit of countless extra hours and skipped luxuries. A cold dread washed over me, so intense it felt like the blood was draining from my face. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, trapped thing. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped my phone as I dialed the bank's fraud department. After a series of security questions that made my throat tighten with anxiety, the representative delivered the blow. The transactions were made from a device that has previously logged into your account, he said, his voice maddeningly calm. The IP address matches a personal computer at your family's residence. I stood up, a surge of adrenaline cutting through the shock. I grabbed my keys and drove straight back to my parents' house, the very place that had hosted our loud, sprawling Thanksgiving celebration just hours before. Images of forced smiles, hollow hugs, and laughter flashed through my mind, each one feeling like a fresh betrayal. Now, standing once again in the familiar kitchen I grew up in, I reached for a glass of water, my hand trembling. My mind was still reeling, unable to bridge the gap between their loving words and this cold, hard theft. "You're back already, Chloe?" Olivia's voice drifted in from the living room. It was light and unconcerned, as if my sudden reappearance was nothing more than a minor curiosity. I walked into the room and saw her curled on the couch, sipping red wine. In the corner, a large, brand-new television box was propped against the wall, a monument to their Black Friday success. "I just checked my bank account," I said. I fought to keep my voice even, but it came out strained, a thin wire of sound. Leo, my brother-in-law, ambled out of the kitchen, popping open a can of soda. He leaned against the doorframe, a smirk playing on his lips that was a mixture of amusement and contempt. "Oh, that," Leo said with a casual wave of his hand. "We needed that money more than you did, Chloe." His words struck me with the physical force of a slap. I froze, the air knocked from my lungs, completely unable to form a response. Olivia let out a soft, dismissive chuckle, shrugging as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Don't be so dramatic," she said, swirling the wine in her glass. "You've got a great job at that tech company, no student loans left, no kids to worry about. You live all by yourself." Her words were meant to sound like facts, but they landed like accusations. My gaze shifted to my mother, Catherine, who sat in her usual armchair, knitting needles clicking softly. Her face was a mask of placid indifference. "Mom," I pleaded, my voice cracking, "did you know about this?" She released a long, weary sigh, never once looking up from her work. Her voice was soft, the same tone she used to use when I'd scrape my knee as a child. "You're always so sensitive about money," she murmured. "You have more than enough. What's the harm in helping your family a little?" I turned to my father, Richard, who was staring intently at his phone, scrolling through some news feed. He didn't even bother to look at me. "Don't use such harsh language," he mumbled, his thumb still moving across the screen. "This is a family matter." A wave of disbelief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. "But how?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How did you even get my banking information?" Olivia shrugged again, the picture of nonchalance. "I was using Mom's computer to look at the sales, and your account was still logged in," she said. "You should be more careful about logging out." She delivered the line with such breathtaking audacity, as if my lack of caution was the real crime here. My hands balled into fists at my sides, my nails digging sharply into my palms as I tried to ground myself. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Leo shrugged, mirroring his wife's casual dismissal of my violation. "It's not like we bought luxury cars or anything," he said, gesturing vaguely towards the new TV. It was for rent, groceries, things to help us survive. Otherwise, we'd be out on the street. I looked from one blank face to the next. There was no apology in their eyes, no flicker of guilt, not even the decency to offer a real explanation. Just a wall of entitled silence. What did I do to deserve this? I whispered, the words swallowed by the vast, uncaring space between us. Olivia tossed her hair back, her expression one of mild annoyance. You can make it back in a few months, she mumbled. Honestly, Chloe, stop being so dramatic. I slowly bent down and picked up my purse, my movement stiff and robotic. No one moved to stop me. No one offered a single word of comfort. As I reached the door, my mother's voice followed me, a mindless habit. Don't forget Sunday dinner. I walked out into the cool evening air, my heart pounding in a chest that felt hollow and empty. But before I left, I paused at the doorway, my hand tight on the knob. I looked back at them, a family of strangers. If you think I'm just going to forget this happened, I said, my voice low and cold. You have no idea what's coming next. Olivia just giggled, a sound that grated on my raw nerves. Oh, please, you're being so theatrical, she scoffed. Honestly, Chloe, we needed that money. Don't be so selfish. I didn't dignify that with a response. Outside, a light drizzle had begun to fall, but inside me, a different kind of storm was gathering its strength. I drove through the rain-slicked Austin streets, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. The traffic light ahead glowed red, but my mind was a chaotic swirl of their cold, careless words. We needed that money more than you did. There was no remorse, no hint of shame, just the staggering weight of their entitlement. It felt like a waking nightmare, a betrayal so profound I couldn't process it. I couldn't bear the thought of going back to my empty apartment just yet. I needed air, space to think. I pulled into the sprawling parking lot of Zilker Metropolitan Park, a place I usually came to for Saturday morning runs, seeking peace. I killed the engine and sat in the suffocating silence, the rain tapping a frantic rhythm on the roof. I opened my banking app again. The shameful little number was still there, as cold and unfeeling as Olivia's expression had been. I wished I could say I was completely shocked, but a part of me wasn't. I had just been hoping, foolishly, that I was wrong about them. The memories came flooding back, a bitter tide of past slights. I remembered my 30th birthday, just a few months ago. My parents had thrown a small family dinner. They presented Olivia with a designer handbag she'd been talking about for weeks. Then, they handed me a flimsy envelope. Inside was a $50 gift card to the grocery store. You're the practical one, Chloe, Mom had said with a smile. We knew you'd appreciate something useful. The sting of that memory was still fresh. It wasn't about the money, it was about the message. Olivia was worthy of luxury, of desire. I was worthy of practicality, of necessity. And just like that, I had become the family's emergency fund, their human ATM. When Olivia wanted a new car, I was expected to help with the down payment. When Leo lost his wallet for the third time in a year, I was the one who got the late-night call for a wire transfer. When my parents needed their roof repaired after a storm, it was my entire bonus that covered the cost. The money I had set aside for a trip to Europe. A trip I had to quietly cancel. Every time, their justification was the same, delivered like a compliment. You're the most stable one in the family, Chloe. They never once bothered to ask, are you doing okay, Chloe? They never considered that I had my own dreams, my own financial pressures, my own student loans I'd worked so hard to pay off. I was just their safety net, their provider. The praise wasn't gratitude, it was an unspoken job description. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windshield. I turned on the radio, desperate for a distraction to numb the ache in my chest. But no melody could drown out the brutal realization that I wasn't a daughter or a sister to them. I was a resource. A credit card with a heartbeat. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Olivia told me you're upset about the money, it read. Don't make this into a big deal, sweetheart. We're family, and family helps each other. Family. Why did that word suddenly feel like a lead weight in my stomach? For years, I believed that if I was just generous enough, just patient enough, they would eventually see me. They would appreciate my sacrifices, maybe even say thank you. But they never did. Because in their world, the person who doesn't ask for help is the one who is expected to give it endlessly. I took a deep, shuddering breath and opened the Notes app on my phone. My fingers flew across the screen, my training as a data analyst kicking in. I started a list. Every loan, every bill paid, every emergency I had funded. The down payment for Olivia's car. The money for her daughter's private school tuition, which cost me a trip I had dreamed of for years. The roof repairs for my parents' house. I wasn't just venting, I was building a case, documenting years of exploitation so that I would never, ever forget. The rain began to soften, and a pale sliver of sunlight broke through the heavy gray clouds. I sat up straighter, my hand steady on the steering wheel now. This time, there would be no turning back. That night, I returned to my apartment, Leo's smug words still echoing in my head. We needed that money more than you did. It wasn't just the theft of my savings that kept me awake, it was their complete and utter lack of remorse. It was the chilling indifference that had stared back at me from the faces of the people I was supposed to trust most in the world. I knew I couldn't let this go. I wouldn't. The next morning, my resolve was like ice. I called the bank and requested a full, itemized transaction report for the past 10 days. When the PDF arrived in my inbox, it was 17 pages long. I printed every single page, the hum of the machine a steady companion to my cold anger. With a red pen, I circled every charge I didn't recognize. One transaction stood out, a transfer of nearly $2,800. The IP address confirmed it was from my parents' computer. Yes, I had used that computer over the holiday weekend, but only to check my work calendar. I would never be careless enough to leave my banking portal open. Someone in that house had watched me, had stolen my login information, and had waited for the perfect moment to strike. That weekend, I drove back to my parents' house, feigning a casual visit. The familiar smell of roast beef filled the air, but it couldn't mask the thick, suffocating tension. Olivia was at the head of the dining table, deliberately avoiding my gaze. Leo was acting overly casual, refilling glasses of lemonade as if there wasn't a raging inferno just beneath the surface of our conversation. I didn't waste any time on pleasantries. I've reviewed all of my transactions from the last 2 weeks, I stated, placing the stack of highlighted bank statements firmly on the table. My account was accessed multiple times from the IP address at this house. I paused, letting my words hang in the air. I was here, yes, but I never logged into my bank. So, I'll ask again. Who took my information? Silence. Mom kept her head down, meticulously cutting her salad into tiny pieces as if I were discussing the weather. Dad hid behind his newspaper, a silent, impenetrable wall. Only Olivia spoke, her voice deceptively small, laced with a familiar, biting sarcasm. You must have left it logged in, she said. It's not like we hacked you. I locked my eyes on hers, refusing to back down. So you admit you were the one who accessed it? Olivia shrugged, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. I saw it was open, she said dismissively. You forgot to lock your screen. And it's not like this is the first time you've helped us out. I didn't agree to help this time, I said, my voice dangerously low. Leo set his glass down with a soft, deliberate clink. You are always so dramatic, he sighed. This isn't stealing, Chloe. It's what families do. They help each other. No, I said, my voice firm and clear. Helping is when one person asks and the other person agrees. This was taking. Without permission. That's called theft. My mother finally looked up, her expression one of deep disappointment, as if I were a stubborn child she couldn't reason with. Chloe, you live by yourself, you have a good career, you don't have the burdens we do, she said gently. Olivia is raising a child. Leo is trying to get back on his feet. A family is supposed to share its resources, and sharing means you all get to quietly drain my entire savings account? My voice trembled, not with weakness, but with the sheer pain of her words. My dad rustled his newspaper, folding it with a sharp snap. He was visibly annoyed now. Don't be so harsh, he said, his voice stern. You have always been the strongest one in this family. You know none of us could handle what you do, so we all trusted you to carry the weight. Trusted me? I let out a short, bitter laugh. Is that what you call it? Stealing my private information and emptying my account is trust? Why don't you call it what it really is? Taking advantage of me. Olivia slammed her palm on the table, her composure finally cracking. We didn't buy anything extravagant, she snapped. It was for rent, for our daughter's medication, for car repairs. I am exhausted. You're exhausted? I shot back, the question sharp as a knife. What about me? I looked at each of them, these people who had shaped my life, who had taught me that my needs came last. I was exhausted when I worked 60-hour weeks to help you pay off your credit card debt, Olivia, I said, my voice rising with years of suppressed resentment. I was exhausted when I had to cancel my vacation to keep you from getting evicted, Leo. I was exhausted when I ate ramen noodles for 3 weeks straight so Mom could pay the utility bill. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I have been tired for a very, very long time. But I never complained, because I thought I was doing the right thing for my family. But I see now that all I was doing was enabling your selfishness. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the old clock on the kitchen wall. I stood up and put the folder of evidence back in my purse. Before walking out, I paused and looked directly at my mother. If this is how you treat the one person in this family who has never asked you for a single thing, I said, then don't be surprised when I start taking back what's rightfully mine. Leo let out a condescending, mocking laugh. What are you going to do, Chloe? He sneered. Call the cops on your own family? I met his gaze without flinching, my own eyes cold and steady. Just wait and see, I said. And with that, I walked out of the house I once called home, feeling not a trace of regret, only the hard, clean burn of resolve in my chest. I got back to my apartment just as the last light of day faded over Austin. The air in my own space felt different, heavy with the cold fury that was still simmering inside me. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled out a file folder I'd kept hidden in the back of my closet. For years, I had saved everything. Receipts, text message screenshots, email money transfer confirmations. Not because I was paranoid, but because some deep, wounded part of me knew that someday, my quiet sacrifices would need a voice. They would need proof. As a data analyst, organizing information was my specialty. I began to build a case. I created a detailed spreadsheet, logging every single dollar I had ever given them. From the first time, a $92.50 payment for Olivia's phone bill years ago, to the largest, a $3,200 wire transfer to Leo for an urgent business expense that I later discovered was for a new gaming console. I remembered that one vividly, because I had to skip a much-needed winter trip with my friends to make my own car insurance payment that month. I color-coded everything. Green for medical needs, yellow for housing and utilities, and a glaring, angry red for all the expenses that had no justification. On Monday morning, I walked into the Financial Crimes Division of the Austin Police Department. I carried a binder with all the printed documents, a USB drive containing the spreadsheet, and a completed police report. A calm, professional officer named Officer Davis reviewed my case. She patiently flipped through every page, her expression serious, nodding as she connected the dots. We will open a preliminary investigation into financial fraud and unauthorized access of a protected computer, she stated, looking me directly in the eye. Do you have the full names of the individuals you wish to report? I do, I said, my voice clear and steady as I handed her the list, Olivia, Leo, Catherine, and Richard. I walked out of the police station under a bright Texas sky, but for the first time in weeks, there was a flicker of light inside me, too. It wasn't a desire for revenge. It was the profound relief of finally, after all these years, refusing to be silent. 2 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon, I was in the middle of a Zoom call for work when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I muted my microphone and stepped out onto my balcony to answer it. It was Officer Davis. Ms. Chloe, we've completed our preliminary investigation, she said, her tone all business. We have found sufficient evidence to move forward with the case. An investigative unit will be visiting the residences of the individuals in question later today. I gripped the balcony railing, my knuckles turning white. It wasn't satisfaction I felt in that moment, but a deep, shuddering wave of validation. After years of being told I was too sensitive or dramatic, someone in a position of authority finally saw the truth of what I had endured. That evening, as I was making dinner, my phone began to light up, a relentless barrage of calls and texts. First Mom, then Olivia, then Leo. I ignored them all. The messages started pouring in, a torrent of panic and accusation. You need to call your mother right now. What in the world are you doing, Chloe? Did you really call the police on us? Are you insane? I put my phone on silent and continued chopping vegetables, my hands surprisingly steady. An hour later, a text came in from an old high school friend who still lived in my parents' neighborhood. Hey, weird question, but there are 3 people in jackets that say Financial Crimes Unit outside your parents' house. Is everything okay? The next day, I arrived at work at Innovest. As I walked to my desk, I noticed a few of my colleagues giving me strange, questioning looks. Before I could even log on, my manager approached me, his expression concerned. Chloe, we received a call from a local news reporter, he said, keeping his voice low. They were asking to verify your employment here in connection with some kind of financial investigation involving your family. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. We told them we have no comment. But if you need to take some time off, just say the word. We support you. A genuine, unforced smile touched my lips. Thank you, I said, but I'm okay. I'm doing the right thing. That evening, I sat by my window, watching the city lights of Austin sparkle to life. Olivia's words from years ago echoed in my mind, a phrase she used to throw at me like a compliment. I swear, this family only survives because of you. She was right. They had survived on my sacrifices. But they had never seen me as a person, only as a function, a tool to be used. And now, that tool had finally broken. I opened my journal and wrote a single declarative sentence, I am not the family bank. Underneath it, I wrote another, I am Chloe. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I saw my own name on a page, untethered to a bill, a loan, or a desperate request. Just my name, a person. And for the first time, I felt a sense of freedom, real and finally within my reach. The first message arrived on a Monday morning, as I was pouring my first cup of coffee. My phone screen lit up with a name I had come to dread, Mom. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, the notification popped up. Chloe, this has gone far enough. Her voice was strained, the usual gentle tone cracking under pressure. I know there have been misunderstandings, but you can't be serious about this. Please, call me back. I set my mug down, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Even now, she couldn't name what they did. It was just a misunderstanding. By noon, a wall of text arrived from Olivia. My bank account has been frozen. They put a lien on it because of your police report. I can't pay my daughter's tuition. I can't even buy groceries. You win, okay? Are you happy now? That last line made my skin crawl. As if this were some petty game I had started, as if they were innocent victims caught in my vindictive plot. But I knew the truth. This wasn't about winning. It was about ending a lifetime of losing myself. The next day, Officer Davis called with an update. Chloe, we've confirmed the unauthorized transfers, she said. Olivia is under formal investigation. Leo is implicated for using the funds, and your parents are being investigated for mortgage fraud, as they used a portion of the stolen money to make payments on their home loan. Oh, was all I could manage to say. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a profound sadness that it had come to this, that they still couldn't see the path of destruction they had carved through my life. That night, Leo called me. Repeatedly. I blocked his number. 10 minutes later, an email appeared from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was just my name. Chloe, please, it began. My boss called me in today. I've been suspended from the dealership pending an internal investigation. They're looking into my finances. I could lose my job over this. It was one mistake. Can't you just tell them it was a misunderstanding? The arrogance was gone, the mockery had vanished. All that was left was the sour smell of panic. I didn't reply. I just deleted the email. On Thursday morning, a short, sharp text came from my dad. He so rarely contacted me directly that it made me pause. The bank sent a foreclosure warning on the house, it read. We have 30 days to pay the delinquent amount or they'll seize the property. I read the message 3 times. There was no apology, no admission of guilt, just a cold, factual statement, underpinned by the silent, lifelong expectation that I, Chloe, would swoop in and fix it. I didn't reply to that one either. But that night, as I stood by my apartment window, I thought of all the times I had put their needs before my own. The dates I had canceled, the promotions I had hesitated to take, the peace of mind I had sacrificed, all for them. I had given them not just my money, but my life. This time, there was nothing left to give. That weekend, I drove out to Lake Travis, a place my dad and I used to go fishing when I was a kid, back when things were simpler. The sun was warm, the water was calm. My phone was silent. The same people who had once called me their lifeline now only reached out when they wanted me to save them from the consequences of their own actions. Mid-afternoon, my phone lit up. A text from Mom. Chloe, I'm begging you. I know what we did was wrong, but if we lose this house, I don't know where your father and I will go. Please don't abandon your mother. I stared at the message for a long time. A pang of something tightened in my chest, but it wasn't guilt. It was the painful clarity that even now, at the end of all things, her concern was for the house, not for me. Not once in all these weeks had a single one of them asked, "Are you okay?" I set my phone down on the warm rocks and walked to the edge of the water. I let the gentle breeze wash over me, carrying away the heavy weight I had carried for so long. I knew this was the hardest part of the journey, the part where they would call me cruel, ungrateful, destructive. But it was also the part where I finally put down the burdens that were never mine to carry in the first place. I looked out at the vast, sparkling water. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about their bills, their requests, their late-night emergencies. I was thinking about me, and about the peace I was finally, piece by piece, beginning to find. 3 weeks later, I filed for an extended leave of absence from Innovest. I didn't tell a soul where I was going. I packed my life into a rental car and left Austin on a gray, overcast morning, feeling like I was shedding an old skin. I drove east, crossing state lines, each mile putting more distance between me and the woman I used to be. I arrived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a city I had only visited once on a brief work trip years ago. The memory of its earthy colors, the scent of pinyon smoke in the air, and the profound sense of peace I had felt there had stayed with me. Now, it was where I would begin again. I rented a small casita with thick adobe walls and a clear view of the mountains. I bought myself a new desk. I filled a locally made pot with vibrant wildflowers. For the first time in my adult life, every single object in my home was there because I wanted it to be. I got a new phone number. I informed my company I would be working remotely for the foreseeable future. And a strange thing happened. Once I was no longer being constantly drained by my family's needs, a wellspring of energy returned. I slept through the night. My mind, once a constant buzz of anxiety, felt sharp and clear. Just 2 weeks after settling in Santa Fe, I received a call from my boss at Innovest. "Chloe, I just reviewed the new project proposal you submitted," he said, his voice full of excitement. "It's absolutely brilliant. Have you ever considered a leadership role? We're looking for a new project leader for the West Coast division." I paused, the phone pressed to my ear. A year ago, I would have immediately said no, my mind instantly cataloging all the family obligations that would make it impossible. But now, I looked out my window at the sunlight glinting off the mountains. "Yes," I said, my voice firm and confident. "I'm ready." My boss chuckled. "I had a feeling you'd say that," he said. "Congratulations, Chloe. The job is yours." After the call ended, I made myself a cup of herbal tea and sat on my small patio, wrapped in a woven blanket. The high desert air was cool and crisp. I had done it. I had broken the cycle. The cycle where I was always the giver, and no one ever thought to ask if I had anything left for myself. The desperate late-night calls were gone. The panicked texts demanding money were a thing of the past. Now, the only messages I received were from old friends checking in, or new acquaintances I'd met in a local art class, asking if I wanted to go for a hike. No one asked for anything. They just asked, "How are you?" I hadn't just found freedom, I was slowly, carefully, finding myself again. One afternoon, I wandered into a small gallery downtown. The owner, a kind woman with silver hair, smiled at me. "You're new here, aren't you?" she asked. I smiled back. Yes, I said. I just moved here.
Ah.
She said, nodding wisely. This place has a way of calling people who need to heal. I didn't say anything, but I knew she was right. That night, I wrote in my journal, for years, I stood guard at a door for a family who never wanted to come inside to see me. They only ever wanted to take what was mine. Now, I have locked that door. And I am finally keeping the key for myself. This new life wasn't loud or dramatic. There were no victory parades. But it was quiet. And for me, that silence was the most precious luxury I had ever known. I didn't know what would happen with my family. Maybe one day they would understand the depth of the damage they had caused, and maybe they wouldn't. But I knew one thing for certain, I was never going back. Not because I didn't love them, but because I was finally learning how to love myself first. One crisp fall morning, as I was watering a pot of resilient succulents on my patio, my laptop pinged with a new email. I glanced at the screen and paused. The sender's name was Sophie. It took me a moment to place her. Sophie was Olivia's cousin-in-law, a quiet young woman I had only met a handful of times at awkward family holidays. She was the type of person who faded into the background, never wanting to cause a stir. I couldn't imagine how she even got my new email address. The subject line was simple, "Thank you, Chloe." With a sense of curiosity, I clicked it open. "You probably don't remember me well," the email began. "I'm Sophie. I just wanted to reach out. I heard about what happened with you and your family, and how you stood up for yourself. For years, I've stayed silent, thinking it wasn't my place to speak up." I sat down heavily in my chair, each word resonating deep within me. "I have been stuck in a similar situation," she continued. "My family always told me that because I had a stable job, it was my duty to support everyone else. I was working 2 jobs just to send money home for my parents and my brother's bad decisions. Whenever I tried to say no, they called me selfish and ungrateful. But when I heard what you did," she wrote, "how you drew a line in the sand and chose yourself, it was like a light turned on in a dark room. You made me realize that saying no isn't cruel. It's an act of self-preservation. You're not protecting your money, you're protecting your spirit." I sat in the quiet of my new home, my tea growing cold in my hands. Outside, the desert wind rustled through the dry leaves. But inside me, something warm was beginning to bloom. It wasn't pride or a sense of victory. It was the profound, healing feeling of being seen, of being truly understood. It turned out, Sophie wasn't the only one. A few weeks prior, an old college friend had sent me a message. "I always just thought you were incredibly strong, Chloe," she wrote. "Like nothing could ever get to you. I get it now. You weren't just strong, you were carrying so much that everyone just assumed you could handle more." I had read that line over and over, the truth of it a painful comfort. For years, I had held everything in, believing that was what strength looked like. But no one had ever taught me that kindness without boundaries is just self-destruction. That night, I sat at my desk and typed out a reply to Sophie. "I never imagined my actions would mean something to anyone else," I wrote. "Thank you for being brave enough to share your story with me. I know how hard that is. Please remember that you are not alone in this. You are not selfish. You are simply learning how to value yourself, and there is nothing more right than that." I hit send, and in that simple act, a powerful truth became clear to me. I used to think I had lost my family, but the truth was, I was finally building a new one. A family not of blood, but of mutual respect. A family made of people who love without demanding, who give without taking, and who see each other as whole, worthy human beings. The next morning, when I pulled back my curtains, the brilliant New Mexico sunlight poured into the room like a benediction. I took a deep breath, and for the first time, my chest felt light. I was no longer the old Chloe, the girl who would shrink herself to make others comfortable, who would stay silent to keep a false peace. I was Chloe, a woman who knew her own worth, who knew when to say enough, and who knew when to walk away from those who refused to see her. And the most beautiful part of it all? I was not alone. Because out there, in the world, there were other people like Sophie, finding the courage to step out of the shadows. And if my painful journey could light up even a small part of their path forward, then every single tear had been worth it. On a bright Sunday afternoon, I strolled along a winding path in a nearby park, the ground littered with golden leaves. A little girl on a bicycle sped past, her laughter echoing in the crisp air as her mother jogged behind her, calling out, "Slow down, sweetheart." I paused, holding a warm cup of coffee, and watched them. The simple, joyful scene stirred something inside me that had been dormant for years, a feeling of uncomplicated lightness. For so long, I believed my worth was tied to how much I could do for my family. I worked myself to the bone, I saved every dollar, I sacrificed my own small joys, all in the desperate pursuit of a good daughter. Label that was always just out of reach. They needed me to be their rock, their foundation, but they never stopped to ask if the weight was crushing me. And when I finally refused to carry it any longer, they called me selfish. I used to live in terror of that word. I was so afraid of losing the very family I was slowly killing myself to preserve. But now, after the storm had passed, after the angry calls and manipulative texts had finally gone silent, I realized a truth so simple it was painful. I didn't lose a family. I found myself. And the person I am today, the Chloe I have become, no longer lives for anyone else's approval. I started doing the small things I had always denied myself. I learned to cook a perfect risotto, a dish I love but had always told myself was too time-consuming. I bought a brilliant red dress, the kind I used to think was too bold for me. I signed up for a pottery class, just for the simple joy of feeling the cool, wet clay spin between my hands. One day, a postcard arrived from a former colleague who had moved to Italy. "You showed me what it means to set boundaries without feeling guilty," she wrote. "Because of you, I finally found the courage to pursue my dream of living in Rome." Thank you, Chloe. I placed the postcard on my desk next to my other treasures, a smooth stone from my first hike in the New Mexico mountains, and the leather-bound journal that was now filled with my own thoughts, my own story. These were the tiny pieces of a life that was truly mine. I no longer waited for an apology from Olivia or a tearful, repentant call from my mother. Maybe one day they would understand, and maybe they wouldn't. Either way, I was okay. I used to believe that love meant holding on, no matter how much it hurt. Now I understand that sometimes, real love means letting go. It means letting people be accountable for their own lives, and taking accountability for your own. When you stop setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, you realize that the people who truly value you would never ask you to burn in the first place. The warmth I feel now doesn't come from sacrifice. It comes from the quiet, steady glow of living a life that is true.